Welcome to Star Wars The Old Republic over at the Edge of Casual. I'm your host Verso, and because nobody can tell me what to do with my free time, today I want to talk about Warzones, or the player versus player combat matches in SWTOR. And I'm going to start off by mentioning that the PvP matches in this game are basically divided into two categories, arenas and war zones. But for the purposes of players like me who don't really bother about the ranked games, it's probably easiest to just lump these all together, since if you're queuing for PvP, you can get thrown into either type, and you don't really have a choice about it. But for the record, arenas and war zones are as different as night and day, at least from my perspective. And I'm not going to be talking about the arenas except to say that they run with smaller teams. 4 versus 4, and they have no objectives except to kill the other team. Also, I hate them, but I may be a little bit biased here since I've been recently playing low-level healers, and I usually get focused down pretty darn quickly. So, anyway, moving on to war zones. These entail full 8-person operations groups, at least on a good day, since they will run with fewer if necessary. But in any event, I prefer these war zones because they are objective-based and can occasionally even be punishing of a team that gets tunnel vision for merely killing opposing players. So in other words, a good plan goes a long way. So objectives come in a few different flavors, but for this video, I've elected to talk merely about the Huttball games. And the general idea with Huttball is that you're literally playing a game in the universe, but because it's for the amusement of some depraved Hutt, like Gerada the Hutt, usually, I think, expect something in the vein of, like, Running Man. There's a ball, there's an end zone, and in between the two is a collection of death traps and an opposing team that's sort of hell-bent on ending you. Anyway, I love Huttball. I've always loved it, and the version we're seeing now is the original pit that was available when the Old Republic launched, and it's probably still my favorite, generally. It can be cheesed pretty hard by a coordinated team that has a stealth player in the end zone, but I haven't seen a lot of games like those. And at the very least, those sorts of games tend to be over mercifully fast. So you're probably noticing that this is all footage of a somewhat low-level character, and though I do occasionally play the level 70 games, and I do alright in those, I sort of prefer the lower-level games. They're just a bit more chaotic and unpredictable, and, you know, by the time you get to level 70, classes are extremely specialized, but in these lower-level games, you get a real mixed bag of ability sets and skill levels. I mean, it's the Wild West in there, and people just seem to be having more fun than the players who are grinding out the endgame matches. Understandably. Since launch, BioWare have added 2 more Huttball arenas, and I'm going to show you the Quesh arena a little bit later in this video. I was not able to get footage of the Sky Shredder, which is the most recent edition. As I mentioned, games are random, so you get what you get, and you can be waiting for the rest of your life if you're looking for a specific arena, which is kind of why I'm only talking about Huttball today, since it was too difficult to get video of all the different matches, arenas, etc. Right, so the main thing to know with Huttball is that the Hutts like action, so if you're carrying the ball, you've got to be aware that if you hold onto it too long, it will explode. Also, carrying the ball slows your character nearly to a crawl, so you really need to be sure that you're looking upfield whenever you've got it for another player on your team who can accept a pass. In regards to passing, possession of the Huttball activates a special abilities bar in the center of your screen with the pass ability on it, and you'll see that at some point in this video if you haven't already. The easiest way to go about passing is to find a player who isn't moving around terribly much and isn't surrounded by enemies, and simply double-click the pass action on the special bar, which throws it to the player's current position. It doesn't always work, but it's how I do it because I'm usually trying to get rid of the goober as quickly as possible, especially when I'm playing a healer, since I've got enough problems with people trying to kill me. And I mean, that's pretty much most of what you need to know. Along the way, you'll find a few fun mechanics like acid or flame traps, or grapple points, or air shafts that can fly you up to different locations on the map, the occasional power-up, and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's about being the first to grab the ball, maintaining your situational awareness about where the ball is at all times, moving it upfield when your team has it, and, of course, absolutely crushing the ball carrier when the other team has it. So anything else is just gravy. That was a really dumb death, by the way. I think I had a stroke. Though I guess we all have our moments where we're like, yeah, whatever. And as you can see, we've moved on to the Quesh arena at this point, which has its own flavor. It's stacked vertically, for one thing, with the ball at the bottom and the end zones at the top, and with larger spaces in which to fight. Though generally, I'd say that if you see people scrapping in the middle of the map in particular, they're probably doing it wrong. As a healer, though, I'm sort of obliged to help them regardless. And by the way, I don't always play a healer in these things. In fact, for years I pretty much only ever played damage, or DPS classes. usually the range damage classes though, because melee is just a bit too twitch skill dependent for a casual-ish player like me. Still, I do it sometimes in the lower level games. Anyway, this is why you'll usually see me playing with a Sith Sorcerer or a Jedi Sage, because these classes can be respec between heals and damage, and both roles are, I think, really fun with these classes. So, yeah, the thing that I like about Huttball in particular is that anybody can be good at killing other players, right? But Huttball rewards team play in a way that I don't think the other Warzones necessarily do. Or to a greater extent anyway, because I think the other ones do reward team play, but Huttball in particular, it's all about the team play. And I appreciate that since my technical skills aren't particularly elite, so to speak, and if I'm good at anything at all, it's playing the objectives. So, speaking of playing the objectives, with all that said, when you play a healer, you do tend to play with your head down a bit because it's a bit of a game of whack-a-mole, but it does also afford you the ability to stand back a bit and appraise the field as well, so I like that. Of course, nobody's perfect, and I'm sure you've already seen me make a bunch of stupid mistakes by now. I'll make a lot more if you make it to the end of this video. Okay, so I'll say one more thing. So these many years into the lifetime of the Old Republic, people have largely made peace with the aspects of the game that maybe aren't necessarily thrilling, and I've seen a good amount of criticism of the game's combat system. And I get that. I totally get that, because when you're running player versus environment or PvE missions, you kind of learn your rotation to the point that you can fall asleep while playing. And you probably have, because the NPCs rarely do much to cause you to have to think. Also, I'll just be honest, BioWare aren't really known for minimizing the number of brainless PvE obstacles standing in your way to completing a quest, which can occasionally be kind of frustrating. But anyway, I feel like PvP is an entirely different ball of wax, however, which forces you to know and use every tool in your toolbox while dealing with opponents that obviously they're not following a script, for obvious reasons, because they're humans, and they're all executing their own unique play style. So if you've played SWTOR in the past and were down on the combat, but you never gave PvP a whirl, I'd suggest that you kind of owe it to yourself to see how different it is. I mean, you may still hate it, and that's fine, you don't have to like it just because I do. Also, just to repeat, you can grab a free-to-play account and start running these as early as level 10, I believe. I think you're still restricted on the number of them that you can do unless you queue in a group, though don't quote me on any of that stuff. There are smarter people than me who can answer those questions for you. Okay, that's my time. Questions and comments below, and in the meantime, thanks for watching, and keep it casual.